Welcome to Impact on Ohio, the series where we highlight Ohio leaders from the State House to the U.S. Capitol. We sit down with dedicated public servants to tackle the issues that matter most to Ohio businesses. Brought to you by the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the state's leading business advocate. We aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Stay tuned for insightful conversations that will shape the future of Ohio's business landscape. Get ready for Impact on Ohio, where business meets leadership, because Ohio's success is everyone's success.
Welcome to the Impact on Ohio series, where we sit down with leaders shaping Ohio's business and policy climate. I'm Rick Carfagna, Senior Vice President for Government Affairs for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined today by Steve Stivers, our President and CEO here at the Ohio Chamber. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be on, Rick.
It's a bit of a twist having me interview you today, but you're a unique guest, given the intersection between business and policy making. Not only do you run a statewide trade organization, but you're a former policymaker. You've served just under 6 terms in U.S. Congress, and prior to that, serving a number of years in the Ohio Senate.
Yes, thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about House Bill 447, which is a bill that updates Ohio's non-economic liability caps and also tethers them going forward on an annual basis to the rate of inflation. So before I start that, I think it's important to try to set the table for today's conversation and note that CNBC earlier this summer named Ohio 5th overall in its annual Top States to Do Business ranking. This follows last year's ranking of Ohio by site selection as being in the top 5 states nationally in the number of announced deals, and a 2023 economic competitiveness study that showed Ohio jumped from 24th most competitive back in 2018 to 13th most competitive in 2023. A great running theme happening, obviously, and we know that none of this happened overnight. So, Steve, talk a little bit about how Ohio is currently positioned and what do we have going for us?
Well, we have a lot of things going for us. We have great infrastructure. We ranked very strong on infrastructure. We have an incredibly low cost of doing business. We have a good cost of living for consumers. There's a lot of things we have going for us. And those have been not by accident, they've been engineered over a period of time. We have significantly reduced the tax burden of both the income tax, the commercial activity tax, and now real estate taxes. Bam, 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 the trifecta. We have reduced regulation in this state. We have worked hard on infrastructure in this state. So we've worked hard on a lot of things. There's a few things that we need to do better. We need to have a more dynamic and diverse economy. We tend to have leaned on agriculture and manufacturing. We've tended to have per capita income that has lagged the country because we haven't had enough things like technology, but with the data centers that are locating in Ohio, the artificial intelligence stuff that's starting to happen in Ohio, the medical technology that's moving to Ohio, the nuclear cluster that is very nascent but moving toward Ohio. We have and the defense cluster that's moving toward Ohio. Our economy is getting more diverse, more dynamic, and much more growth oriented. Those are all incredible things. And I would tell you, House Bill 447 could cut at the basis of many of those by increasing the unpredictability of our legal climate. And it's really problematic and very much undermining the cost of doing business, where we have a giant advantage.
So you've just sort of outlined why the Ohio Chamber is opposed to House Bill 447. Can you maybe start and explain in very simple terms what House Bill 447 actually does?
So House Bill 447 is sponsored by an attorney who has had lawsuits, and he feels like non-economic damages are not high enough in Ohio because he gets paid on non-economic damages. So let's start with what lawsuits are. Lawsuits are what happens when somebody feels that they have been wronged in some way. There are really 3 sets of damages, two big sets. Compensatory, those are to compensate somebody for their loss. And punitive damages, those are to punish somebody who did something wrong. If you didn't do something intentionally wrong, there's probably not going to be punitive damages. So then compensatory damages are split into two parts. There's economic damages. Those are anything that can be measured in dollars and cents. Medical bills, cost to retrofit your house, lost income, anything that can be measured in dollars and cents.
If I total your car, for example.
If you total your car, any costs to replace your car, the loss of the ability to get to work as a result of your car, any cost to get a rental car, those would all be, and any loss or injury to you and your future care, all your future care for the rest of your life, those are all economic damages. What are non-economic damages? That's what this bill deals with. Non-economic damages are basically pain and suffering, loss of consortium, things that you can't measure in dollars and cents, but mostly pain and suffering. They are measured in tears and heartache. And so I was the sponsor of Senate Bill 80 in 2003, 2004, and we capped non-economic damages at basically $350,000 per individual. And that's on top of the economic damages. The reason we capped it is it can't be measured in dollars and cents. And the fundamental flaw of House Bill 447 is it applies inflation in dollars and cents to the dollar figure we created a long time ago. California, a much more liberal state than Ohio, had non-economic damages, flat non-economic damages of $250,000 for about 50 years. And yes, it's been about 20 years since we capped non-economic damages. By the way, that has resulted in a much improved situation in Ohio. Let's talk about the medical situation. It used to be in 2004, doctors were leaving the state. You couldn't find people to OBGYNs or general practitioners that would help you deliver your baby because the insurance for that was so high that they actually were leaving the state or just closing down their practice, or the general practitioners were saying, I'm a general practitioner, but I don't deliver babies anymore. It was a giant crisis. If you massively increase non-economic damages, you could see that come back. And the other thing that I think massively increasing non-economic damages does, it's built into every lawsuit, whether it's goes to trial or it's settled, it's going to increase the tort tax on every individual, which is already, about $1,000 a year, would probably double. It's going to be a giant problem that you will pay for in the cost of goods and services that you buy here to live your life. So it's a big problem, and really, to what benefit? There is no evidence that raising non-economic damages will improve the lives or change the lives of the people who are victims because they're already compensated. Economic damages are completely uncapped. They can be at any level. They could be $1 million, they could be $1 billion. If you can show that those were your economic losses, that's your recovery. And so I think a lot of trial lawyers make money on non-economic damages because they can increase the cost of the lawsuit and they get a percentage of that. Contingency fees, on average, 33%. So the person who sponsored this, every time they do a lawsuit, if they can get non-economic damages up, let's say they take them from, in this bill, $350,000 to about $580,000, that's a couple $100,000. 33% of that is real money. I understand that, but it's real money that you and I pay as consumers to support trial lawyers.
Well, and not only does it increase the caps for judicial awards, but it also increases whatever the settlements could be.
It will increase every settlement, even if it's $5 or $10 or $100. It will increase. It's built into every lawsuit, whether they're settled or they go to trial and hit that cap. It's going to increase the cost of every lawsuit that's filed in Ohio, And that's whether it's a slip and fall case, whether it's a traffic accident, whether it's a product liability case, whether it's a medical malpractice case, it's going to increase the cost of every settlement in Ohio, and that is going to cost every Ohioan more money. And the way we usually pay for this stuff is insurance. We all get insurance. It's going to raise the cost of insurance in Ohio in a massive way.
Not to mention, it's a greater incentive to even bring a lawsuit forward in the first place, a private right of action, as it's
That's
called.
correct. It just makes them more valuable, which means more people will bring lawsuits.
Against small, medium-sized businesses.
We'll see more lawsuits filed, especially against mom and pop businesses where most people do their business.
You talked a little bit at the outset about the trifecta of tax reforms as of late. Ohio has nearly eliminated the commercial activities tax. They've implemented a flat income tax. The Ohio legislature has just sent a package of 4 different property tax reform bills to the governor, who has just enacted those into law. But then there was another one. That's the business income deduction.
That's correct.
Which
Helps
helps small businesses. It continues here in our state. It's great for entrepreneurs and for startup businesses in particular. So, given all of the significant progress that we've made on tax relief in this state, how do you think House Bill 447 could undermine those efforts?
Well, I think, it just makes Ohio less competitive. And, one lawsuit can talk about the business income deduction. One lawsuit can put a small business out of business because, everybody assumes, well, they'll settle for insurance limits. If the result of the lawsuit is more than insurance limits, that business owner's on the hook. They can go out of business. That's less taxpayers for the state of Ohio. I think it just makes Ohio a less competitive place to do business. There could be less taxpayers. I think ultimately it's bad for Ohio in lots of ways. Will a few people see a benefit from it? Probably. Trial lawyers and a few victims might get a little more money, but at what cost to the business climate and the small businesses and the insurance rates in the state?
Well, and some of that tax savings, if not a lot of that tax savings, could be eroded by increased insurance, as you had alluded to. And so, multiple opponents to this bill have stressed that Ohio currently has some of the most competitive and affordable insurance markets in the entire country. How do you think it would affect insurance premiums just for everyday Ohioans, whether we're talking about auto insurance, homeowners insurance, or even the cost of health care?
It's hard to put a exact figure on it, and we've got some actuaries looking at exactly what it could mean, but Ohio's auto insurance rates are the lowest in the country, among the lowest in the country. I think you'd see us move much more toward the middle because, again, these caps on non-economic damages apply across every kind of lawsuit, whether it's a slip and fall case that would be covered by a business and their liability insurance, whether it's an auto accident that would be covered by the person who owned the car's auto insurance, whether it is, something in a medical malpractice case that would be covered by the malpractice insurance from the doctor and the hospital. You'll see everybody's insurance go up at least double digits as a result of this. I can't put an exact figure on it, but assume it's going to be more than 10%. It'll be a big figure.
So let's stay on that for a little bit when we talk about health care, because the medical community is particularly concerned about this bill. I know that the Ohio Hospitals Association, the Ohio State Medical Association have both come out as opponents to this bill. You spoke earlier about Senate Bill 80, which you sponsored 20 years ago to put these caps into place, and what a different world it was back then, particularly when it came to the provision of health care. Before the 2003, what happened to our healthcare system before the 2003 medical malpractice reforms? And why do you think doctors and hospitals are worried about going back to that environment?
Well, again, medical professionals were fleeing our state. They were closing down their high-risk practices and focusing on things that were low risk because medical malpractice insurance premiums were so high in Ohio. And the other thing that's happened since 2004 is we've seen the graying of our medical providers. We have a lot of medical providers who are at or beyond retirement age. Every day they have to decide if they want to keep practicing. If we drive medical malpractice rates up again to anything close to like what they used to be, we could see this mass exodus and retirement of a bunch of medical professionals and create a giant shortage. We've seen the medical profession get less and less interested in the legal system over the last 20 years because we have a pretty good system that works. All of a sudden, you saw the Hospital Association, the Ohio State Medical Association raise up and say, we care about this in a way that they haven't been engaged in a legal liability issue probably in 10 or 15 years at least. So this is a giant issue for the medical community because there's a lot at stake. These are typically cases with a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of very emotional emotions around these cases. And so those are the kind of cases where you see non-economic damages just spike. And I think this would be a giant problem for our medical community. And I think we'll see mass retirements if we don't kill this bill.
Well, and it's also, for everyday Ohioans, it's also an access to care issue. I mean, particularly in some of the more rural counties, because we've heard stories about the dearth of OBGYNs in some of these counties. And if they can't if they're not insurable,
right,
if they can't get covered, they're going to flee or they're just not going to proliferate.
That's exactly when I say you're going to see people close down their practices or retire. It's going to have an especially adverse effect in rural areas, in southern Ohio, and in rural areas in general where there's less density. And you're going to see access to care problems of not getting enough access to especially specialty docs or OBGYNs and things like that. So it could be a giant problem. And that's what we had in 2004.
So one of the unique features of House Bill 447 is that it ties damage caps to the Consumer Price Index, but then it has automatic annual increases. So why is linking subjective damages like pain and suffering to the price of consumer goods problematic? And what does it mean that the legislature would lose oversight over these increases? Because now, they give their okay just once, and then forever and ever, it just automatically is revisited annually.
Yeah, so it would put the increase of the non-economic damages on autopilot at whatever the consumer price index is. And again, as I said, pain and suffering can't be measured in dollars and cents, so it doesn't have the same inflation as products that are measured in dollars and cents. Certainly, pain and suffering is real. Pain and suffering is problematic, but it's not something that a few extra dollars is not going to take away somebody's pain and suffering or change your pain and suffering. It really is just an inappropriate way to look at non-economic damages. The first word, hyphenated word in non-economic damages is non-economic. So applying economic principles, economic inflation to non-economic damages is really inappropriate. And again, you make the point that the legislature would then lose control. The one thing I will say is, while I don't think the legislature should raise non-economic damages, they have the power to do it on any given day. It's called the Ohio Revised Code for a reason. But when you put something on autopilot, they're going to have to act to stop anything, and it's just going to be going up, 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 up. And what we've seen in states that there's very few states that have these inflators. Only 9 states have these kind of inflators. And what we've seen in those states is they've run businesses out. Their insurance rates have gone up. It's a giant problem in these states. And it's not the right approach. If the legislature deems it necessary to raise non-economic damages, what they should do is raise them. And then if they want to raise them again, let future legislatures have that choice. In fact, in many ways, we don't let legislators of today spend dollars for tomorrow, but that's exactly what they'd be doing in these cases. they would force businesses and the insurance, anybody that's insured for anything, every consumer of insurance, to spend more money forever in a guaranteed inflation of those non-economic damages into perpetuity.
Well, and you talk about putting this on autopilot. Every year it's going to get increased per whatever the CPI happens to be. Well, in a single month during 2022, the CPI hit 9.1%. So, while annually it's hovered around 3% or so, the fact is it's a blind number. We don't know what that number will be year after year after year. So you could have spikes. You could have a little bit more of a smoothed approach. We just don't know. And so
I think the point there is unpredictability, and it does create a lot of unpredictability.
So yeah, what kind of volatility, with that volatility, I mean, how does a business try to manage risk and plan for the future?
Well, it would be impossible for a business to plan for the future or manage their risk. They'd just have to pay whatever their insurance company, said the bill was. I'm sure people will shop for insurance companies, but actuaries, do the math, and the glide path will be about the same at every insurance company, and you can manage it within a few dollars, but it's still going to be guaranteed to cost you more every year for auto insurance. It's guaranteed to cost you more every year for malpractice insurance if you're a doctor. It's guaranteed to cost you more every year for liability insurance if you're a small business. It just becomes very unpredictable. Again, what if we get in a point of runaway inflation? All of a sudden, these damages are going to just spike. And, again, let me go back to economic damages. Inflation is applied to them every year. And inflation is appropriate on economic damages, things that are measured in dollars and cents. And they are already accounted for, and you already can use an inflator when they usually have economists figure all this out, and they look at what are things going to cost in the future. So inflation is appropriate on economic damages, but not non-economic damages, Rick.
So, there are, I talked about our competitive rankings at the very beginning of this program. How favorable we are in certain categories. There are other categories such as legal climate, where at one point Ohio was the 15th worst legal climate. There are also rankings on things such as nuclear verdicts. How do you think 447 threaten our competitive advantage as a state if you're a business that is deciding where to locate or whether to stay here and expand their operations?
Well, people look at a lot of factors when they decide where to locate. And you talked about nuclear verdicts. Nuclear verdicts are multi-million-dollar verdicts. And Ohio already ranks really high in nuclear verdicts. We are in the top 10 states in nuclear verdicts. And with this, we will spike for sure, because it's going to raise the cost of every verdict. And when you can add $580,000 of non-economic damages to whatever the economic damages are, it gets a lot of verdicts up to $1 million really quick. So that it's a giant jump in our potential nuclear verdicts, and it makes Ohio look less competitive. And that means less people could choose Ohio. And when we're talking about affordability being the number one issue that everybody's talking about, the last thing the legislature should be doing is exacerbating the problem of affordability with things like insurance that everybody pays.
The Ohio Supreme Court is currently reviewing two cases challenging the constitutionality of Ohio's damage cap. So they've already decided to accept one of those cases. The other case is still pending. Supreme Court's trying to decide whether or not they're going to take it up. Just recently, the Ohio 6th Circuit just upheld a medical non-economic damages cap as applied, overturning a trial court decision. So, already the appellate courts seem to be supporting the continuation of these damage caps. Supreme Court's looking to take up two other matters. Should the legislature wait for those types of rulings before making changes to the system? Should we get out ahead of the courts? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think generally when the courts are reviewing something, let them review it. Let them decide they will decide whether the current caps are appropriate. They look at a lot of factors when they look at constitutionality and appropriateness. And, we trust the court to be the adjudicator and referee on what's constitutional and what's not constitutional. These non-economic damage caps have been tested before and been held up, but if there's a legislator that thinks, oh, I'm not sure, maybe we should raise the non-economic damage caps, first let's see what the court has to say. If the court thinks they are constitutional and appropriate, that should be a good sign that maybe they're still okay, and you shouldn't rush to judgment and make big changes right now.
Well, and to try to prognosticate these things, I mean, we do have a pro-business Ohio Supreme Court in place. I mean, we can look at some of these past decisions, how some of these justices have voted in other cases, and get a good sense of if they applied that same logic to these, that they will continue to uphold.
Yeah, I think that's possible, although, folks like Maureen O'Connor, who started out as a more conservative justice, ended up as a very liberal justice in Ohio and changed her mind on that. So people can evolve, justices may change, but that's why we elect them and we trust them to make those decisions. And I generally trust our Supreme Court, even the people I didn't personally vote for, I trust them to do their job.
So House Bill 447 is currently pending in House committee. It has not received a vote in committee, let alone a floor vote in the House, so it's still fairly early in the legislative process. But if it were to be passed and signed into law, what's your message to Ohio families, to small business owners, to anyone concerned about the cost of living and doing business in our state?
I would just say anybody that voted for this bill is voting against affordability, and you should look at the roll call on this vote. I know the chamber is going to look at it. We expect to probably key vote this because it's a big deal to the business climate. And to the Ohio voters, I'd say hold the people accountable that are raising your cost of insurance and your cost of doing business in Ohio.
Well, it's certainly been an issue that has galvanized businesses across all different sectors, from healthcare to manufacturing to energy. Everybody seems to be rowing in the same direction in opposition to this. So it's a critical issue that I think more employers and Ohioans need to be aware of. And so, Steve Stivers, I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all this, letting us know what's at stake. And for that, I'm Rick Carfagna for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank you all for joining us today on Impact on Ohio. Thank you.
If you have an idea for the Impact on Ohio video series, email us anytime. You can also scan the QR code to take you directly to the YouTube page and watch Impact on Ohio.